The beach house had always been my sanctuary. Every morning, I would wake to the gentle sound of waves lapping against the shore, the salty breeze drifting through the open windows, and the warm sun spilling across the polished wooden floors. This place was mine, not just in a legal sense, but in the way that matters most. Every piece of furniture, every painting, every little seashell collected from trips down the coast had a memory, a story, a fragment of me woven into it. It wasn't just a house, it was a lifetime of effort, love, and quiet joy. So when I got the text from my sister, casual, cheerful, completely oblivious to the emotional stakes, saying she'd be popping by the beach house for a few days, I laughed. I assumed she meant a weekend, maybe a couple of nights, and that we'd enjoy her company in my carefully curated retreat. I never expected her to show up with a suitcase that looked like it belonged to someone planning a permanent stay, a truckload of IKEA boxes, and a smile that was way too confident for someone who had no right to be there. I arrived at the house that evening, after a long day at work, expecting the familiar calm of my refuge. Instead, I was greeted by an unfamiliar sight. My living room had been transformed. The soft linen sofa I had spent months hunting for was gone, replaced by a garish, bright sectional that seemed to scream for attention. The warm, cozy rug that had been a perfect match for the sunlight streaming through the windows had vanished, replaced with something cold and synthetic. Even the paintings on the wall, my own choices, picked during quiet mornings spent wandering local art fairs, had been swapped for abstract pieces that made no sense in the context of the house. And the smell, the faint scent of my home had been replaced by something unfamiliar, a mix of candle wax and cheap air freshener. I froze in the doorway, staring at her as if I'd walked into a parallel universe. What happened here? I asked, my voice shaking with disbelief. "Oh, I just thought the house could use a little updating," she said cheerfully, as though she hadn't just destroyed months of careful planning. "You know me, I have great taste. I thought you'd love it. Don't worry, I didn't spend much, not spend much," I repeated, my stomach twisting. All of this, it's my furniture, my house, my choices. You can't just. "I'm just helping you," she interrupted, waving a dismissive hand as though that explained everything. "It's temporary, right? You'll thank me later." The word temporary echoed hollowly in the empty space she had commandeered. I tried to argue, to assert my ownership, but the longer I looked at her, the more I realized the truth. She didn't see me, didn't see the house, didn't see the life I had poured into this place. She saw an empty playground, a canvas for her whims, and she had planted herself firmly at the center of it. I left that night with my heart heavy, wandering along the shoreline, letting the waves wash over my bare feet, trying to think of a way to reclaim what was mine. The betrayal stung sharper than the cold ocean water. My sanctuary had been invaded, my choices erased, and my trust broken. And yet, beneath the anger and shock, a tiny, stubborn ember of resolve began to glow. I would find a way, not just to get my house back, but to make her understand in the clearest possible terms that some things are not hers to take. The storm, I realized, had only just begun. The next morning, I returned to the beach house with a sense of quiet determination, thinking perhaps I could talk some sense into her, maybe even laugh off the chaos she had created. But as soon as I stepped through the door, I knew this wasn't a simple misunderstanding. She was already there, lounging on the new, garish sectional, scrolling through her phone with a smile that made my skin crawl. "Good morning," she chirped, as though nothing had happened. "I made some breakfast. Hope you like the new setup." I clenched my jaw, forcing a calm I didn't feel. "Listen, we need to talk. All of this, it's not yours. You can't just change my home and pretend it's fine." She looked up, feigning innocence. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. It's all temporary, remember? Besides, I think it actually looks better. You should be thanking me." I wanted to scream, to shake her until she understood, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I went to the kitchen, hoping to find something, anything, that still belonged to me. That's when I noticed it, a crisp envelope resting on the counter with my name in her handwriting. I opened it and froze. Inside was a bill, not a note, not a playful "just kidding" letter, but a detailed invoice itemizing every piece of furniture she had upgraded, every painting she had replaced, every little decorative change she had made. The total was astronomical, far beyond anything she could have reasonably spent for just a few days of help. She had calculated labor, delivery, and even included a markup for her time and expertise. And at the bottom, in bold letters, "Please remit payment within 10 days." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. She had not only invaded my home, but had the audacity to charge me for the privilege. My sanctuary, my carefully built, cherished refuge, had become her playground, and she had the nerve to treat it like a business transaction. I stared at her, and the laughter that had once been warmth in my chest curdled into something cold and sharp. "Are you serious?" I finally whispered, my voice trembling with a mix of disbelief and fury. "This is my house. You can't relax," she said, leaning back with an almost theatrical sigh. "I'm doing you a favor. You should be grateful someone is taking care of your place for a change. You work too hard." Her words felt like knives. I thought of every memory, every quiet morning, every painstaking choice I had made in that house. She had erased all of it in a matter of hours. And now she had the gall to lecture me about gratitude. Over the next few days, the tension in the house became unbearable. She rearranged rooms while I was out, acted as if I didn't exist, and subtly mocked my protests, her amusement growing with every frustrated word I uttered. Friends and family started noticing the strain. Some offered support. Some quietly suggested I was overreacting, but none could comprehend the depth of the betrayal. That night, I sat on the beach outside, staring at the dark waves, feeling anger, disbelief, and a quiet, simmering determination. This wasn't just about furniture. It was about respect, boundaries, and the audacity of someone who thought they could rewrite my life so casually. And deep down, I knew the ember from yesterday had grown. I wouldn't let this slide, not quietly, not easily. I would find a way, not just to restore the house, but to restore the balance, to remind her that some things are sacred, untouchable, and worth defending. And in the quiet rhythm of the ocean, I began to plan. The battle had begun. The morning sun spilled over the horizon, glinting off the waves, and for the first time in days, I felt a spark of clarity. Anger still coursed through me, but it was tempered now with strategy. My sister thought she had claimed the beach house, that she had bent reality to her whims, but she had underestimated me. She didn't know me well enough to understand that if I couldn't confront her head on without losing my composure, I could outsmart her in ways she would never see coming. I began subtly reclaiming the house, one small victory at a time. First, I retrieved my favorite things: the coffee table I had built with my father, the paintings that had been carefully hung on my walls, the soft rug that had absorbed countless sunsets. Each item returned to its rightful place felt like a quiet, private triumph, a whisper of authority that she couldn't quite notice immediately. Then came the playful part of the revenge. I didn't want to humiliate her cruelly. I wanted her to realize with gentle irony that her entitlement had limits. I rearranged the furniture she had forced into the house, leaving the pieces slightly misaligned, not ugly, just subtly inconvenient. Chairs were just a fraction too far from tables, picture frames slightly tilted, throw pillows plumped in ways that seemed intentional but were mildly irritating. She would notice it. Of course, she always noticed, but I made sure she couldn't place the blame. I also began sending anonymous little reminders about the absurdity of the bill. A handwritten note left on the kitchen counter. Did you know sand can't be purchased, neither can memories? A small sticky note tucked under the new lamp she adored. Furniture is temporary, respect is forever. Each note wasn't accusatory, it was poetic, ironic, a mirror reflecting her own audacity. I watched as she grew frustrated, pacing the rooms and muttering to herself, trying to make sense of the subtle sabotage. Friends became unwitting allies. I invited a few over for casual visits, strategically placing them in rooms where her changes were most intrusive. They commented casually about how charming my old decor had been, how funny it was that certain new items seemed slightly out of place. Nothing aggressive, nothing confrontational. Just a quiet reinforcement of my authority and taste. I let her simmer in the background, feeling the gentle pressure of social awareness without a word from me. And through it all, I reminded myself of why I was doing this. It wasn't petty revenge, it was reclamation. It was about asserting boundaries, reclaiming respect, and teaching her that love between siblings did not mean surrendering your life or your choices. Every subtle adjustment, every anonymous note, every casual conversation with friends was a thread in a tapestry of restoration I was carefully weaving. By the end of the week, the house had quietly returned to a state that felt like mine again. The furniture was almost perfectly aligned, the paintings in their familiar spots, my belongings restored. Yet she remained, bewildered and increasingly aware that her control had eroded without confrontation, without drama. And as I stood in the living room, watching her frown at a slightly crooked lamp and mutter to herself, I smiled not out of cruelty, but out of satisfaction. This was sweeter than shouting, sweeter than tears, sweeter than immediate confrontation. She would learn her lesson in subtlety, in awareness, and in quiet respect. For the first time since her arrival, I felt calm, powerful, and in control. The tide had turned, and I knew the final wave, the emotional confrontation, was coming. By the time the weekend rolled around, the house felt almost like mine again. Every item was back in place, every room restored to the comforting balance I had always cherished. My sister, however, was visibly unsettled. The subtle ways I had reclaimed the house, the slightly crooked lamps, the notes, the casual affirmations from visiting friends, had chipped away at her sense of control. She wandered the rooms like a ghost of entitlement, occasionally muttering to herself, occasionally glancing at the familiar items that had quietly returned. I realized it was time not for theatrics, not for angry shouting or humiliation, but for honesty. I needed her to understand the depth of what she had done and the impact it had on me. "Can we talk?" I asked one evening, leaning against the doorway of the living room, the warm glow of the setting sun reflecting off the restored wooden floor. She looked up, startled, and for a moment I saw uncertainty flicker in her eyes, a small crack in her armor. "Sure," she said cautiously, sitting down on the sectional she still seemed to cling to. I took a deep breath. "I want you to understand something. This house, it's more than furniture or decor. It's years of my life, my memories, my choices. When you moved in and replaced everything, it wasn't just a matter of taste, it was a violation. It felt like a betrayal." Her face softened slightly, but she didn't respond. She seemed to be listening, really listening for the first time. "You sent me a bill," I continued, my voice firm but calm. "For what? For existing in my own home. That wasn't funny. That wasn't helpful. That was wrong." I let the words hang in the warm, quiet room. She shifted, looking down at her hands. I could see the guilt beginning to creep in, small and hesitant, but there. "I didn't realize," she murmured. I thought I was helping. "And that's the problem," I said gently. "Your idea of helping doesn't erase someone else's life, their memories, their boundaries. You can't give love by taking over, and you can't assume gratitude by forcing your will. We sat in silence for a moment, the soft ocean breeze drifting in through the open windows. It wasn't angry silence, it was reflective, almost cleansing. The tension that had been strangling the house for days began to ease. I saw in her eyes that she finally understood, not just intellectually, but emotionally. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, her voice barely above the whisper of the waves. "I didn't mean to hurt you." I nodded, feeling a strange warmth, a release. "I forgive you," I said, "but I needed you to see. Respect isn't optional and boundaries aren't suggestions. I hope you remember that." She smiled faintly, a mixture of relief and shame. "I do, I really do." And just like that, the house breathed again. My sanctuary was restored, but more than that, a lesson had been quietly learned. The sweet revenge wasn't in anger or humiliation. It was in reclaiming what was mine, in standing firm, in teaching a boundary without cruelty. As I stepped out onto the deck that evening, the sun dipping below the horizon in streaks of orange and gold, I felt a profound sense of peace. The house, my memories, and my boundaries were intact. My sister had been humbled, but not broken. And for the first time in days, I could simply smile, letting the waves wash away the tension and knowing that I had won in the most meaningful way possible, with patience, cleverness, and heart. The storm had passed, the tide had turned, and the beach house, my home, was finally mine again.